Hello and welcome inside another episode of Take to Take. Patrick Tallon joined once again alongside Nick Robinson and Luke Burrows. Gentlemen, how are we doing today?
Patrick.
Hello, Patrick. Hi, Pat.
Hi. Glad to be back with you guys. Last episode, we talked a little bit about some of the series that were still going on in the first or the qualifying round, I should say, but that is all done and we are well underway in the first official round of the NHL playoffs. Before we touch on the series, the biggest news out of the NHL is the NHL draft lottery. Alexis Lafreniere, most likely, I don't want to say going, but New York Rangers have the first overall pick. That's the story.
He's going to New York.
I don't know, but I could see a situation with the centers they have. They're pretty strong on the wing of them taking a center. That way you have a good 1-2 as Zibanejad and Byfield. I'm not saying I think it's a possibility. I wouldn't rule it out, but they're probably going to go Lafreniere, but I wouldn't count it out. Anyway, your thoughts. Rangers first overall pick. What do we think?
Out of all the teams it could have been, I'm pretty happy with the Rangers. I think I said Rangers or Wild I'd be okay with, like top two. And the only reason I wouldn't want the Wild is because that was Vancouver's, but then I realized someone told me they do it like alphabetically or something.
Right.
But no, the Rangers, because Rangers weren't making the playoffs anyways. And that original pick, that Team TBD pick that won the first draft lottery was in some way Winnipeg's, right? And the Rangers had, I think, .001 differential of point percentage compared to the Jets. So I'm pretty happy that that's, and from the NHL's perspective, that's probably the most normal scenario. So I'm pretty content with it.
Yeah, from a business standpoint, I think that the NHL is loving this because obviously the New York Rangers are one of their most profitable teams and one of the most easily marketable, recognizable teams. So any chance that they're getting now to load them up with talent, like it's good for the NHL. Capo Caco last year, and now I'm still thinking it's going to be Alexis Lafreniere. I know I get what you're saying, Pat, with Byfield and the Rangers being a little weaker down the middle than the wing, but if I'm the New York Rangers, well, I would probably take Byfield if I was the New York Rangers, to be honest. But I know from probably what that organization is thinking, they're probably looking for a player that's going to make an immediate impact. And I think we can all agree that Alexis Lafreniere is more likely to make that immediate impact compared to Quentin Byfield. So I would still think they're going to take him.
Yeah, I would agree. I know Nick and I were both pretty high on Quentin Byfield. I think they will go Lafreniere. I just wouldn't rule out the possibility of Byfield making that jump. But I would agree. I think it's you look at the revenue the NHL lost given the entire COVID pandemic. So that's obviously a good thing for them. As a Habs fan, I am frustrated. Luke and I were talking about this earlier. The Rangers are an organization that irritates me just as a Habs fan. You look at the.
I disagree with that, by the way.
So you disagree with that the Rangers irritate me as a Habs fan?
No, I disagree with your reasoning why the Rangers are an irritating team.
Why do you think I think they're irritating?
Because you said they get lucky and they seem to get all the right.
In a way, they lucked into getting Adam Fox. He was basically gifted. Trouba kind of bullied his way there. At the time, Trouba's not good, but Trouba kind of bullied his way there.
Stuff like that happens all the time.
I know, but they won the Kako. Well, they lucked their way into the top three. They were not supposed to be in the top three. Look at how high they jumped to get the top three. They signed the marquee guy in Panarin. That's not an issue with the organization. It's just frustrating. It seems like the Rangers got the guy. I'm happy Lafreniere is going there. He's going to do well in that market. It's exciting for a big market like New York to have that player. But as a Habs fan, there's also, you have to understand, it'd be like, I don't know who Vancouver's rival would be. I'm not saying New York is Montreal's rival. But
yeah,
there's more animosity in that series.
I use the example of like Dallas, like same conference, but there's not really any.
But there is really some with Montreal in New York.
Okay.
I guess that usually happens when you have a recent playoff series against each other. Last time the Montreal Canadiens were in the playoffs, they had it with New York. Same thing with Ottawa. They don't really have a rivalry with Pittsburgh, but it's a little nasty every time they play Pittsburgh. Ottawa sort of has that with the New York Rangers as well. They played them a couple of times. But no, I get what you're saying, Pat. Obviously, New York, I think, definitely has needed a lot of luck to sort of accelerate their rebuild. They probably would have gotten to this juncture that they're at right now eventually. But I think the fact that they've really been gifted two lottery picks in the way they have the past couple of years, I think it definitely has accelerated the process for them.
Yeah. Yeah, so, it's definitely sped it up. It's not an issue. Yeah, it's not an issue with them, but you have to look at the luck. Panarin wasn't luck, but that just kind of helped. That was sort of like an immediate, sort of expedited the process.
Right, and that's the pull of the big market team. That's an advantage New York has that a lot of teams don't have.
Yeah, and that's not their fault. But moving on.
Yep, sure.
Luke, moving on. Okay, let's touch on some of the first round series. There was one in the West we're going to touch on before we move on to the East, because we're going to touch on a little bit more. A couple of series in the Eastern Conference. That is Edmonton, Chicago. So before, I don't know who everyone predicted. I think I predicted Chicago.
I also predicted Chicago.
Luke, you went with Edmonton, I believe.
I probably would have gone with Edmonton. I don't remember, but
so Chicago won. That was a fun series. A lot of people are criticizing McDavid, Draisaitl, rightfully so. Their GM said they need to be battle tested a little bit more. What do we think? What do we think of Edmonton's playoff performance?
I wouldn't say battle tested a bit more. I think obviously without McDavid and Draisaitl dragging the Edmonton Oilers, they're not in this position this year. There's not a lot on that team other than McDavid and Draisaitl. I mean, Yamamoto and Nugent Hopkins, and they've got a couple of other solid players. But obviously without those two superstars, they're not here. But I do think there is something to the notion, and I think Ken Holland got into it a bit, that perhaps McDavid and Draisaitl have to almost alter the way they play, because I think the two of them are so focused on scoring and getting the Oilers the goals they need that they do forget about the other side of hockey, which is their defense. So we've got a chart here. This is courtesy of evolvinghockey.com. It's a little comparison of McDavid and Draisaitl, and as you can see there, the blue bars on their offensive stats, their goals for per 60, XGF, and Corsi for. And then obviously the expected goals against and chances against per 60, very, very weak, almost bottom tier defensively in the league. It's replacement level defense, essentially, is what it is. But Ken Holland is in a predicament when he's criticizing those two, almost asking them to change the way they play, because now if McDavid and Draisaitl aren't as focused on offense, do they score the goals that Edmonton needs to get them into the playoffs?
Yeah.
It's a big question.
And I think it's easy to criticize the star players. That usually happens whenever a team loses. You're going to look at the bigger guys, and that's fine. And you can criticize McDavid. You can criticize Draisaitl for their defense. But it always comes back to, especially with Edmonton, the roster construction, the players that these guys are surrounded with. It's not good. Chiarelli destroyed that team. And you can criticize McDavid and Draisaitl for their performance in this series. I thought McDavid was unbelievable, obviously. We all saw what he was doing. But these guys need support. It doesn't matter how good these guys are. It doesn't matter how good they are together as a 1-2. They need the help. So it's also, the onus is on Ken Holland as well to improve the team around them.
Right, and I think a lot of it too, Ken Holland has still only had one season at the helm of the Oilers. So I think maybe with a bit more time, he can sort of construct a roster how he wants to do it. Obviously, they were a lot better this year than previous years. They got good goaltending finally from Koskinen specifically. I think we all knew maybe going with Mike Smith in game one sort of just absolutely blew that game. That was the wrong decision from Dave Tippett. But back to McDavid and Draisaitl, I think him wanting them to be more defensively responsible, again, it's a correct claim, statistically, analytically, any way you look at it. Those two aren't good in their own zone. He's not wrong there. But again, there's no way that those two can alter the way they play without having a better roster and a better supporting cast. That's how I see it. Luke, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
I think I kind of agree with you guys on all points. I don't think you can really criticize those two, and obviously they need something to help them out. But I think one thing everyone kind of just needs to think about, and I would say the same thing for the Toronto series, but I am a bit more passionate about some changes they need to make. It was a 5-game series under really unusual circumstances. Chicago is obviously a great playoff team. They're still a great team in general. Like Taves had himself a series, and I think, yeah, Edmonton lost in 4 games. I don't know. Obviously, people are going to read into it, but maybe it's not as big of a deal as people think. But I think getting McDavid and Draisaitl some support shouldn't be something that people are realizing. And I wouldn't say, like you guys, for example, I wouldn't say you guys are, but that shouldn't be something people are just realizing now after they've lost to Chicago. I don't think there's any massive revelation that's come from that series. I think Chicago got the better of them over 4 games, and still McDavid and Draisaitl need help. So
I would agree with that completely. I think at the same time, credit to Chicago with the way they played. Nick, we talked about it earlier. I'm never going to bet against Patrick Kane in the playoffs. Jonathan Toews.
He wasn't even the star of the series.
Exactly.
I thought that was the Jonathan Toews show 100%. Yep. He was brilliant.
Exactly. Dominic Kubalik as well. He was fantastic. Jonathan Toews is a player that I really like. I've always admired him growing up. He's people kind of think that he's fallen off, but if anything, he just hasn't gotten the media recognition. He's been one of the most underrated centers in the league, in my estimation, for the past 5 to 8 years.
Yeah, and we talked about that a bit, right?
Yeah.
We touched on that during the series. Obviously, Jonathan Toews was, I would say, overrated for a little bit, probably at the peak of his powers back in the 2010 to 2015 era, when people started to associate him with Sidney Crosby.
Right.
Who is the superior Canadian hockey player was always the question sort of back then. But I think that sort of shifted the attention to Jonathan Toews is not as good as Sidney Crosby, which I think we can all accept that and agree with that. Yeah. But when you start going so overboard with the look how much better Sidney Crosby is, I think we sort of got into a discussion of Jonathan Toews is bad, and that's what people started to assume, right? It went from one extreme to the other. But I think now, and this series showed it, Jonathan Toews is what he is. He's a good, solid number one center. He has been his entire career, and he showed it in that first round series. He was awesome.
Yep, I think in the supporting cast, obviously Kubalik played well. Brandon Saad, another guy who steps it up in the playoffs. Duncan Keith could be a little bit better, but even then, he is getting old. Corey Crawford, a bit of a question mark, is he's sometimes inconsistent, but he has shown in the past that he can get hot at the right time. So I'm happy for Chicago. I'm excited for Chicago. Chicago is one of my favorite teams, and I'm hoping they continue to run because that would be a cool story. Luke, anything you wanted to add on that?
Nope.
Okay. Moving on to the Eastern Conference, Montreal-Pittsburgh. Montreal, they beat the Pittsburgh Penguins.
You're really sad about that, eh, Pat?
No.
As you can tell by the Canadiens hat on.
Yes, I was not cheering. I was cheering against them up until Game 4, and it was too close, and I was like, all right, whatever. So
I think if we went back to the episode, I know I said it. I probably said it multiple times. It's not that. I'm sure you guys agreed with me and maybe said it as well. But Carey Price had potential to steal that series, and he just did.
Yeah, he went back to his 2014 level. He actually did it.
Everyone said, such a short series, riding a hot goalie can do it. And if anyone's going to do it, if any lower seeds are going to knock off a higher seed, it's going to be Montreal. So.
Yep, and it's funny because for that reason, Pittsburgh was actually one of the teams, I think Chicago was another one, not that it would affect them, that said that of all the players that teams are scared to face moving to a best-of-5 series, it's Carey Price. And Pittsburgh was against that, and funny enough, they had to face them. So I thought Carey Price played exceptional hockey. I think he's on a mission, and again, in short series, he showed what he can do. At the same time, Crosby, he was unbelievable. Evgeny Malkin looked terrible. The first 2 games, when people said, oh, Gino's getting mad, I was actually nervous because we know what an angry Gino can do. But he was invisible for the rest of the series. Your guys' thoughts on the series? Either of you.
Sorry, I had my mic muted there because my dog is eating. I was waiting for Luke to jump up. I don't know if you guys can hear that.
I've said what I've had to say.
He's having a nice meal right there. But yeah, I think, Pat, we did talk about it. We said Carey Price maybe has that potential, even though he hasn't had the greatest last couple of years, but he actually went back to the 2014 level. It was unbelievable. I think Pittsburgh, there's going to be a lot of changes that are going to have to be made there. I think Jim Rutherford sort of has recognized that already in his post-playoff exit interview there with the media. Evgeny Malkin, I think, has really quieted down the past couple of playoff series. We remember the Penguins were swept last year by the New York Islanders, pretty much went out without a whimper. And the same thing this year. It just felt eerily similar. And that's pretty shocking considering the fact that this was a team that won back-to-back Stanley Cups just a few years ago, 3-time Stanley Cup champions in Crosby and Malkin. It's pretty shocking to see how the mighty have fallen almost. Do I think they're going to trade one of Malkin or Crosby? Absolutely not. But I think Jim Rutherford is correct. There needs to be some restructuring there. And I think we're going to get into that he's let go of the 3 assistant coaches, Sergei Gonchar, Mark Recchi, and I forget who the third one is.
Jacques Martin.
Jacques Martin, former Senators coach. And I think Jim Rutherford, though, this is sort of like a job-saving move for him, trying to get the coaching staff going, maybe retool the roster, because I think he's equally at fault for a lot of the flaws on the Pittsburgh roster, giving out some bad contracts. He's made some questionable acquisitions, and it started to add up on Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I think looking at the Pittsburgh Penguins, I will credit Jim Rutherford. So Jacques Martin, Sergei Gonchar, Mark Recchi all gone. I don't know what all of their roles are. I know Jacques Martin was in charge of the D. Jacques Martin always been a sort of old school defensive coach.
Oh, yeah.
How much you can blame on Jacques Martin when you have Jack Johnson playing so much, I don't think is that fair. But again, he said, and every single year he says, our goal is to win the Stanley Cup, and we will do everything in our power to do that. And we saw it this year, bringing in Jason Zucker, a veteran, and Patrick Marleau, something he does consistently. So I think it's good because not a lot of GMs, or maybe it's just Marc Bergevin, who doesn't say he wants to win a cup, but Rutherford has made that his goal every single year to get the most out of the Crosby-Malkin era. So that's a good move. It's a good start. I don't think you'll see Mike Sullivan fired. I like Mike Sullivan. I think he has a good system running in Pittsburgh. So we'll see what happens there. But I like the move from Jim Rutherford. I think shaking things up is good. Because honestly, Pittsburgh didn't look good at all.
And, I think Jim Rutherford's lucked his way into Pittsburgh still being good this year. You look at some of their players here. John Marino was excellent this year in his rookie season. 23-year-old defenseman came out of nowhere, emerged as one of the top 4 defenders on that team. He was excellent all year. That sort of just fell into their lap. Somebody like Teddy Bluger also, like really solid. And Brian Rust continued to emerge, and he was an offensive force for them all year. And then obviously we look down here, we're on their cap friendly here. Matt Murray and Tristan Jarry. While Murray was a bit shakier this year, you had Tristan Jarry step up and become an all-star goaltender. He was awesome all year. And a lot of these pieces have fallen into Pittsburgh's lap. And it's a shame for that organization, that fan base, that they haven't been able to capitalize on that because they've been gifted all these good players on top of what they already have. And yeah, they weren't able to turn it into
when did Matt Murray sign that contract?
I believe that was after the second Stanley Cup they won. It was a couple of year extension. I can look at it here.
No, that's okay. I was just wondering because that's he seems underpaid.
Yeah, he seems like somebody that's going to be on the move. I would think. I would think they're going to go with Jarry longer term. Yeah. Matt Murray had a .919 save percentage in 50 games in 2018-19, but fell all the way back down to an .899 in 38 games this year. So really confusing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Drop off. But I could see him as somebody that the Pittsburgh Penguins are going to try and move in the summer.
Yeah, we'll see what happens with Pittsburgh. Obviously, I think they're going to make some more changes. I think this is honestly just the beginning. As far as that series goes, as much as there is talk about Carey Price stealing it, I think credit to Montreal's younger players who've been the only few bright spots when their veterans have essentially disappeared. Luke is rolling his eyes, but I'm sure Nick can probably be a little bit more objective here and acknowledge that Nick Suzuki and Jesperi Kotkaniemi shutting down Crosby and Malkin was pretty exciting, especially given their age and how well they played. They've been the bright spots in this series.
Do you think Kotkaniemi is better than Crosby then?
That's basically what I'm saying, yeah.
Okay.
All right. Before we Nick, anything you wanted to add?
Nope, I'm all good on that.
One last thing just regarding that series. Montreal announced today Shea Weber and Marc Bergevin met the media. Claude Julien was rushed to the hospital via ambulance last night, had some chest pains. They disclosed that it was not COVID related, which is good, but he will be out for the remainder of the series. So Kirk Muller will be taking over the role as head coach. Unfortunate news.
It's just series, right? Not playoffs?
Series,
I thought I saw playoffs somewhere.
As far as I know, it's just series, so we'll see how that goes.
Either way, just gotta hope for health for Claude Julien and hope everything becomes better.
Yep, exactly. So moving on to another series in the East, one that I think, given the teams we cheer for, we probably have the most thoughts on this one. That is the Toronto-Columbus series. So Toronto rallied back from quite a deficit with less than 5 minutes left. And the expectations were for them to come up flying the following game, but they lost.
I hadn't heard about any of that anywhere.
No, that was all over. That was all the media was talking about. So Columbus beat Toronto. Keefe was outcoached, in my opinion. Toronto was outplayed. I think the Leafs and Leafs fans underestimated how good of a system Columbus plays, how well guys like Bjorkstrand and Wenberg can play. and Columbus won.
Pretty funny. Like it's pretty funny. It happens every year. I think Toronto, like they're, especially where we are, they're just so overhyped and there's so much pressure on them. I feel bad for the players. Like
media perspective,
so much,
I feel
like,
bad for these guys, but
yeah,
like fan perspective, like it's
fan perspective, it's hilarious.
It's hilarious
like
at this
it's just
point.
of course it happened. I don't think Toronto needs to blow anything up. I think there are some moves that need to be made. I think I wouldn't even really pin the loss on anyone. I do think Mitch Marner is overpaid. I want to get that in there big times. The only guys on that team that I would say, like, I forget how I worded it, but give a blank check to are Austin Matthews and John Tavares, under the assumption Tavares knows he's not, worth as much as Matthews. But everyone else, like Nylander had a really good year. Still think maybe he's, I wouldn't say overpaid, maybe a bit overhyped in this market. And they got to figure out their defense. With the defense they have, you'd be crazy to expect them to actually go anywhere, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think Kyle Dubas is a good GM, and I'm pretty sure I've praised him on the show before, and I've praised him to you guys and some people we know that are, that like the Toronto Maple Leafs and all that. But I can't get over it. He does need to shoulder a lot of the responsibility for this, in my opinion. I know Leaf fans are really interesting because it's either you're one way or the other. Either you despise Kyle Dubas and the movement towards analytics and more statistical analysis from the Toronto Maple Leafs head office, and you hate all that, or you absolutely love Kyle Dubas and there's nothing he can do that's wrong. You really, really trust him. I think it's completely in the middle right now, though. I think Dubas has made good moves to try and better the team. Bringing in Jake Muzzin was a really good move. He finally did solve the backup goaltending problem, bringing in Jack Campbell towards the end. He's brought John Tavares to this team. That was all him. But he needs to take responsibility for, not solving the backup goaltending problem sooner than he did, because if you look at it, the Leafs would have played somebody worse than Columbus had he gotten more standing points from a backup goaltender. Like, we have to think how many standing points Michael Hutchinson cost them down the stretch. And we look at that defense, and while they did allow less chances and they were better than last year, Cody Ceci averaged 20 minutes a night with this team. I cannot understand, and I tweeted this out after they were eliminated, and I've told you guys this. I cannot fathom the arrogance, and I will call it arrogance, to acquire your provincial rival's worst defenseman, pay him. They could have let him walk, mind you. They could have not tendered him a contract, dumped Zaitsev and Brown on the Senators, and walked away from Ceci completely. But they tendered him a contract, and they played him 20 minutes a night. I can't even begin to fathom what on earth Kyle Dubas was thinking, or what Sheldon Keefe and Mike Babcock were both thinking with Cody Ceci. I don't understand it. And you look at it, he then stapled to Morgan Riley for the entire season, dragged down Morgan Riley's value. Like, I don't understand it. It's one of the most peculiar decisions I think that's been made in the NHL in a long time.
On Dubas, I think, and this, all credit where credit's due. This isn't my idea, but I think up until this year, he had pretty much total control over this team. I would say after this playoff or play-in exit, not so much. I think there's going to be some other minds getting involved instead of just the Kyle Dubas show.
Yeah, he's on thinner ice now, that's for sure. Pat, I don't know.
No, I wouldn't say like dangerously thin, but definitely.
No, not dangerously
thinner.
thin, but obviously I think there's a bit more cause for concern in the Leafs market.
I think I agree completely with what you said about Dubas and Babcock and someone like that. They're so split on him. I see a lot of Leafs fans crediting Lamoriello, saying that he's the reason and that they let him go and he's why the Islanders are having success, even though I'd credit most of that to Barry Trotz. But at a certain point, you have to realize that this is an overrated hockey team. They're a good team. They have fantastic players, but they're overrated. Someone like Morgan Riley is absolutely dreadful defensively. We can see here.
He's an
Cody
offensive
Cece.
rover.
Yeah,
That's what he is.
Cody Cece. So what I've noticed and what happens every single time the Leafs play piss poor hockey is they always sort of argue which of the big four to move. And I agree completely with Luke. I think Mitch Marner is overrated, and I think he's overpaid. I think Nylander, someone I'm a big fan of on the Leafs. I love the way he plays, but I do think he is a little bit overrated in what other people think he can do. I would say that Matthews and Tavares were the only two that showed up in that series and played some of the best hockey that I've seen. I thought Matthews was unreal, someone who struggled defensively, really
He
picked
has
up
been the
his
last
game.
couple of playoff runs. Like, you cannot pin any of this on Austin Matthews.
Yeah, exactly. So looking at their defense, because that's been the issue, even when you add Muzzin, even when you add someone like Tyson Barrie, whose expectations were obviously higher for him. Yeah.
Terrible. That experiment did not work. That's another thing Dubas needs to be held accountable for. The Kadri deal for Kerfoot, and Barrie blew up in his face. Kerfoot's good, but Barrie was horrendous. Like that.
Yeah.
Kindly putting it. He was horrendous.
Exactly. So some of this, I think some of the changes to their blue line will happen rather organically. I think you're going to see, obviously, CC will not be there. Tyson Barrie, I'm assuming they're going to let him walk. Rasmus Sandin, I know these fans are hoping will step in. So some changes are going to need to be made. But at the same time, you have to move some pieces because you can't – I think people sort of saw Pittsburgh's Cups and saw them as, well, they had serviceable defensemen, but they had enough offense to back it up. I don't think that's the case with Toronto because I don't think their forwards are good enough defensively to have weaker players on defense. So we'll see what happens, but I wouldn't blow it up, that's for sure. But you have to acknowledge and admit defeat in a way and acknowledge that this team isn't that good as people think, and they need to get better defensively. They need to play more mature hockey, and they need to, start getting together some wins. Because it's not even funny at this point, even for us who like to make fun of the Leafs. It's getting to the
Pretty
point
funny.
where it is funny, but it's almost like it's funny, but it's also like we're so used to it now. They can't seem to figure it out. All right, so yeah, honestly, I just think that was so.
What were you
honest.
saying?
Sorry. So as I was saying. No, I just think at a certain point, people need to temper expectations for what they expect with this team because there's a lot of work that needs to be done defensively, especially defensively, actually, mainly defensively, and they need to figure it out. They need to play some better hockey. Keefe was out-coached, as I mentioned. John Tortorella, I thought, was unbelievable. So I think it's just an overrated team. And
I think they just suck.
Yeah. And
now, keep in mind, I will give them – they were a little unlucky in terms of shooting. I think they shot 2% at 5v5. But, we can't blame bad luck every single year that they've lost. For both Boston series – or for the Washington series, it was we're too young. For both Boston series, I think it was, but Kadri got suspended. And then this year it was, we're unlucky. We couldn't score at 5v5. Eventually,
excuses for losing, it's so stupid. Every
credit
single
to Columbus,
every single team
Columbus
that loses is going to have an excuse. There's going to be, and they're real excuses, but you lost for those reasons. It's not we won, but we didn't because of this. So it doesn't really count. Of course it counts. You lost because of that. You lost because you were too young.
With the shooting talent they have,
because Kadri got
they should
suspended.
be able to outplay sometimes a hot goalie like Korpisalo, and they even got lucky.
We didn't even talk about that. He was so good.
Game. He was unbelievable.
We'll get to Korpisalo in a second because that brought me to another point. Is what some people are saying that Korpisalo's 85 saves and all that stuff that sort of shows that the Leafs ran into a hot goalie. It's okay, that's sort of a fair argument, but when you're spending that much on the cap to star players whose only job is to score. You can't just say, hot goalie. It's no, you're paying these guys a lot of money. They have to score. Yeah. And when you score that few goals in that series, you have to blame those players.
Right. And when you don't do that, it just points out to the overall flaw of Toronto's model. Again, they rushed to draft as many good offensive players as they could, which is fine. But they have done not enough to build a good defensive core. And Frederik Andersen has had a habit now of, giving up soft goals and make or break games, and big players just don't show up in the big games, in the couple of game sevens, and this year in game 5. You need more from that team. They're capable of more. Whether or not they eventually hit that, it's all on them. It's all on them as far as I'm concerned.
If you guys are in charge, who do you think they're going to move? Who do you think they should move? A lot of people seem to be criticizing their
Marner for defense.
Their bottom six. I think their bottom six is okay. I thought Kerfoot played well. Nick Robinson, I thought, was a little bit underwhelming given the fact that he was.
Give him some slack.
Yeah, no, I know, and I'm not discrediting
there was a lot
his
of hype,
play,
for him.
But
that's not his fault.
No, it's not.
No. I'm not blaming him, and I like Nick Robertson as a player. I think that was a steal of a pick, but for the hype around him, is it a bottom six issue, a defense issue? Who do you guys see moving? If one of the big four is moved, who would you?
It's all got to be, all their movement has to be based on improving their defense, whether it's letting players go or trading away players and bringing in other talent. It's all going to be focused on upgrading their defense. I can't see Dubas, as good of a GM as he is, I can't see him having the gall to pull the trigger on trading one of the big four. I just can't see him doing it. I don't think he's that gutsy to make that big of a deal.
He must know that Marner's contract sucks. Like, he must know.
Well,
that.
Exactly, and that's been Dubas's one big falling point in his entire tenure as GM. He has botched several contract negotiations. I think he could have gotten all these players less expensive, and while they may be worth the money that they're getting,
I think
again, you have to look
reasonable.
at you just have to look at teams like Boston, who have the capability of getting all their younger players on good salary, and that's just Dubas just simply didn't have that command at the negotiation table or whatever it is.
Yep. But I think in a way he sort of pandered to the younger players, giving them what they want, giving them a blank check, and I don't think you can do that as a GM.
Right, and it just points to fundamental problems with how the team is built. But like I was saying, we got off topic there, but any move they make has to be focused on addressing the defense. They have a backup goalie now. I'm pretty sure Campbell's under contract for at least next year. Frederik Andersen still has 1 year left, and that's going to be another big point for them. Like, what do they do in a year from now when Frederik Andersen is up? Because will they be able to re-sign him? They're going to have to trade it. I think more likely we're going to see players like Kapanen and Janssen dealt to free up some cap space. I think teams would take those players. They're both solid, probably expendable to Toronto. You can probably have Nick Robertson, somebody like him, play the role of either one of those two. So, yeah, there's going to be moves that are made. I don't think it's going to be one of the big four. It'll more likely be depth, in my opinion.
All right, Luke, anything else you want to add before we close things up here?
I have been as vocal as I'd like to be about the Toronto Maple Leafs today.
So now we get to watch other teams and not hear all about the Leafs for a little bit. That'll be a nice change. So that's going to do it for us here. Another episode of Take the Take. This is episode 26, I think?
Yep, something like
that. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll catch you later.